Today I want to talk to you about toxic masculinity. I want to do an extensive exploration of that concept. I am Dr. Joshua Kolawole. I'm a global lean, agile, transformational leadership trainer from Valdymas Intelligence. Why did we choose to discuss at Valdymas Intelligence this time? Because after doing evaluation of several organizations, I discovered one critical factor that is really impacting so well, not only at organizational level in this case. You see it strongly in families, strongly in nation building, even when we're still young, in schools, you see all these things. So toxic masculinity refers to a cultural concept and set of behaviors that is traditionally associated with the male individual as being the dominant individual, or maybe it promotes dominance, it promotes that emotional suppression, aggression, and the devaluation of the traits considered as female. So when you think the female gender doesn't amount to anything and you want to override even their choices, it's not only when you eat them or something, but even the mere fact of manipulating them with anger, overriding their choices, may also be a trait of toxic masculinity. So I need to set something clear at this point. Being a male figure or masculinity as a concept, as a cultural concept now, is not toxic in itself. So that's where I will have to create a balance, because we still need the physical strength. Where you direct it to and how you use the physical strength is what then matters. So I also want you not to use that physical strength to start suppressing your emotional capacity, especially to build emotional intelligence. I'm not saying to now become emotionally susceptible. So I am trying to balance both the upper limit and then the lower limit in this case. So I want us to know that rooted in a very day out of violence, emotional repression, and misogyny, and rooted in the heart of great control is evil, and it's harmful. We know that's harmful to society, harmful to individuals. So one great idea that I first want to list out the core trait of toxic masculinity, then I now talk about the great idea after that. There are 5 classic features as documented in several articles that studied. The first one is emotional suppression. By nature, as a man, you're trained to suppress your emotion. You're not supposed to cry in the public. Don't show vulnerability. You should be strong. You should be able to bear pain. Sadness, fear should not affect you. In fact, if you have affection for something, they will say you need to control it. Yeah, emotions like anger and pride are then considered acceptable. Now, they don't want vulnerability, sadness, fear, bitterness to be reflected, but they consider anger, pride to be more acceptable. And what destroys people the most? Pride. Number one destroyer of all men is pride. And so if masculinity in its toxic sense accepts pride and anger to manipulate the other gender, and if you do that, if you don't do anger and pride as a man, they consider you as weak, then we need to really define the concept of weakness in that case. So I want you to know that the concept of emotional suppression is one critical thing I would have to address in this class. The second one is aggression and dominance. They want you to be physically tough. Once you show up, there should be some aura of strength around you, such that once there is conflict, everybody automatically assumes it has to be the male gender propagating it, right? Because they believe you are normal with conflict or with violence. The third one is homophobia and misogyny, where viewing women as inferior or as an object, then it becomes terrible. Or when you mock them or devalue a man when they demonstrate expression of emotions, or when you see a man who is non-aggressive. Stoicism and invulnerability. Men must appear strong. I'd mentioned that. Actually, men must appear independent and in control at all times. The part that I really had issues with is they don't expect man to seek help, either emotional, psychological, or physical. That's seen as a sign of weakness. Then in terms of sexual conquest and control, the male figure is seen or has gained its worth over years or generations by the amount of sexual success or control they have over others. That is a wrong concept of the excellence that masculinity is supposed to bring. Or they reduce relationships to just power dynamics instead of mutual respect. So I've listed 5 things. I'll recap them so that you can flow with me, because I want to adapt it to personal, business, that's organizational and national leadership. So the first one is emotional suppression, aggression and dominance, misogyny and homophobia, stoicism and invulnerability, and then sexual conquest and control. So historically, the patriarchal tradition has actually really impacted on the male figure. So you may have inherited it socio-culturally, and especially when you live in a society where authority and even superiority is assigned to the male figure. At birth, they celebrate even the birth of a male child even more, and all those things. If you live in a culture where you have to have the tough guy image, the capacity to lead, of course in sports, in military, of course we have to emphasize perseverance, endurance, aggression, capacity to remain strong. I've spoken about perseverance effect too before, where I need people to stay the extra mile, to keep going, to hold on even on to the last mile and conquer. Yeah. And we have built institutions that somehow in their framework had supported the patriarchal nature ahead of that balance. So my job today is to now create balance for men. So toxic masculinity exists. You will be shocked that even when you're denying it as a man, you may actually be exhibiting it. That's why you're denying it. And that's how close home it could be. And that's why for organizations to excel, these are one of the crucial things they need to really look out for, and I would say provide trainings for their team on, especially when you have a team that is majorly male. Look, on men themselves, the impact is this. It affects the mental health of men, and that's why we're having higher rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, substance abuse due to unaddressed emotional pain. People have to bottle up a whole lot of emotional discomfort just because they want to look like a man. It makes it difficult for some men to form deep, emotionally connecting relationship with others. They don't have emotional rich connection with others. They just dart across the waters as they relate with people. And of course, you can know that it would have organic health diseases, either at medical or psychological level. And in most cases, the toxic masculine nature would make sure that diagnoses are made late, because men wants to prove that they are strong and they can deal with things by themselves, as against seeking for help. On the side of women and the society, that's women and children now. I'll talk more about the younger boys, but I'll just say women and the female children. There's gender-based violence because of that. Because we have now normalized dominance amongst the male gender, this has led to a lot of sexual harassment, assault, and even domestic abuse. And it's still predominant in some parts of the world. Workplace inequality, women may be undermined, considered as inefficient, unfit to hold the role, unfit to lead in a position, unfit to lead even when they have demonstrably shown that emotionally, intellectually, they are qualified for that position, but they are sidelined. In fact, sometimes objectified just to demean them and push them away, and excluded consciously from leadership. Another part that makes it very difficult is that in parenting, fathers may now have to struggle to even emotionally connect with their children, especially their female kids, because of the toxic masculine nature that seeks to just dominate. So it makes it difficult to even help guide gender roles for their kids, because a man that is seen as strong will want also their daughter to be super strong, and then you may even destroy the inherent tender nature in them in another way. So for boys and young men, the challenge that this push them to is it makes them bullies, because they don't want to appear too soft, and so they overcompensate and then bully. They have been told that they are not conforming to a standard masculine ideal, which the world may have sold to them. And then when it comes to academic underachievement now, when you have a lady getting higher score than you, and as a man, people start saying, so look at yourself. So it leads to a whole lot of emotional bottling pressure for the young boys. Of course, that also over time may lead to some form of sexual identity confusion, leading to various identification of sexual orientation and all those things. So those kind of disorder may also be a repercussion of stuff like this. At organizational level, the challenge we are facing, and that's one of the reasons why we had to do this video at Valdymas Intelligence, because these are predominant factors we've isolated from a couple of our analysis, and we see more authoritarian leadership lifestyles. When you're a man, you foster some rigid top-down management that stifles collaboration and innovation. So if you're not careful and open enough, you discover that you're the only one leading yourself in the organization, because every other person will just allow all decisions to come from you alone. Nobody cares. Of course, that leads to poor team dynamics, and then that means that the environment becomes less competitive, more hostile, and is less open to communication among employees. Exclusion of diverse perspective. Women and minority voices would be marginalized in your organization when you demonstrate toxic masculinity, are leading to some homogeneous decision making, because all your decisions will now come as the male thinking, logical. None of them comes through the feelings, the emotional pathway that also can be mixed with the logic to make the approach more holistic. Of course, there may be resistance to change, because a lot of times when the suggestion comes from the feminine gender, you may decide to want to just sideline it because you just want to prove that you're a man, and that wouldn't help the organization in the long run, because you're only defending your gender. You're actually not building an organization. Then this will definitely lead to high turnover rate, burnout among employees, because it will create an unhealthy work culture. And unfortunately, this is not really a thing that is paid attention to by HR leaders and all those. So reputational damage could also ensue. So normally, you would expect something greatly different in religious organizations, especially Christian religious organization in this case. But you'll be so surprised at how it's the same. And this is one of the things that gets at me the most, because you now find people authoritatively, because of their masculinity, also wrap it around a divine being controlling them to control the people. So there's suppression of women in ministry, there's lack of empathy. You see increased moral scandals and cover-ups in the system. Because of the fear of appearing weak, it leads to a lot of secrecy, and leaders fall into several moral failings that many years later in their life, then they come out and then they become an issue for both the organization and the leader themselves. And what ultimately happens is there's resistance to progressive reforms in churches. We need a lot of cultural and structural reforms, prioritizing tradition over clear justice, godly justice and inclusion is a sign of toxic masculinity, and it's something we really need to look into. On the scale of national leadership, I know over the years, many military generals and leaders have been male, and this is a difficult terrain for me, being also a male figure, and understanding the authoritarian and governance kind of nature that the male gender had handled from the beginning of the world. So there's been a lot of marginalization of women, and they've become minority in so many even policy making processes, and it has ignored their needs, perpetuating a form of inequality on a large scale. Of course, you would have heard stories about in war, we protect children and women. All those things are just like a compensatory. On the normal day, we're not supposed to do that if we had balanced things out, and so we're supposed to protect everyone. It's not about protecting one. In fact, the fact that you're tagging them vulnerable group already means you have objectified them. So this, of course, because of the male dominance figure, there's corruption and lack of accountability in so many organizations. There are many cases I can list out. There are popular cases in Nigeria, in the United States, across the world, of male dominant leaders who just want to have their way like a king will do in many years, many decades ago. So, of course, this is changing. However, it's something I would like leaders across board to pay attention to, because when we're driving quality improvement and we want transformation in an organization, if you have this kind of toxic masculinity in your organization, it will stifle improvement, and it makes it much more difficult for us to drive growth at any form. So, in politics, in sports, even in family dynamics, the male figure has been seen as too strong, too dominant, and they even brag about the toughness. It makes it then becomes difficult. There's there's this concept of hyper-masculine lifestyle that equates to wealth and people having muscles, 6 packs of muscles. And he also equates to control and success. And so even as a young boy, that might also be a picture one is looking at. I just want to be rich, I want to be wealthy, I want to be that dominant male figure that controls everything. To the point that you refuse to even change diapers as a father. It's difficult for you to express affection. So is masculinity in itself bad? Of course, the answer is no. Masculinity is a positive, healthy, life-giving attribute. That's why fathers are life givers. But what makes it wrong is the toxic nature that comes with the too much courage, too much protection, too much assertiveness. Those inherent traits are what makes it toxic. So the traits, when these traits that are good becomes exaggerated to the extreme, become used to dominate others or to manipulate other people's decisions, to force them to do what you want. And then when it affects your emotional intelligence and it suppresses you from being a compassionate person, then that makes it very wrong. So how do we balance it? I have some strategies. There's some key points I need you to first see. 4 things. 4. 2 E's, 2 C's. 1 is emotional intelligence. I want you to understand how to express and manage your emotions constructively. I want you to show empathy and respect for others. Treat everyone with dignity, including your younger sister, your elder sister, your wife, treat everyone with dignity. Male or female, treat everyone with dignity. So the first one is emotional intelligence, expressing and managing your emotions constructively. The second is empathy and respect. The third is collaboration over control. Ensure that instead of forcing your decisions over people, seek opinion as much as possible, as quickly as possible, generate consensus. Work with them to understand things, even when it's like an emergency and you have to take a decision. Still keep communicating until they catch up. That would engender collaboration on days when you have more time. Then one other critical thing, that's the 4th one, is courage to be vulnerable. I know vulnerability has different definitions and you're not supposed to use it to manipulate people, because you want people to be vulnerable does not mean you should play on their intelligence. But please, when you're struggling and you need support, share. Talk to people. Look out for people in your neighborhood, in your environment. Talk to them, share. So how do we manage this concept of healthy masculinity? Because that's what I want to achieve, healthy masculinity. I want us to create an environment that is emotionally intelligent, that is really empathetic, shows respect to others, allows for collaboration, and builds a lot of courage. One of the ways to combat this is what I'm doing, education and awareness. Sharing these videos among young boys, young men, young minds, and even amongst older men to be able to communicate it to their younger boys. Leveraging different forms of media that is available. Of course, as I'm learning to become better at being an healthy masculine figure, to also ensure that I become a positive role model for other fathers, other mentees, teachers, leaders who needs that emotional balance, for my son as well, to ensure that he appropriates his thinking as he's aging, as he's evolving, to understand how to balance healthy masculinity and to leverage the strength of masculinity to build something great instead of using it to suppress others. If people think they need therapy and some mental health assessment, yeah, please, it might be good for you to seek help psychologically. We need to avoid dangerous jokes or songs or things that we've created in our culture that speaks to hyper masculinity. We need to really deal with those things in our day-to-day behavior that shows it. I am always an advocate of both the young guys and the young girls should be able to put in the energy to work. Don't dodge responsibility because you just feel the male figure too should do it, then because it will now be a counter effect. Then in movements, make sure you create balances as much as possible that is needed based on your understanding in that organization. So toxic masculinity is not an attack to men. Of course, I'm a man. Just trying to analyze the harmful effect of the hyper male figure when you think you're full of energy. And I also don't want to feminize men. I don't want you to become a woman, so don't get me wrong. I just want you to be in the upper and lower limit boundaries of understanding the healthy masculine nature. Understand that your well-being and the well-being of others matter. And I want you to also have an holistic view of manhood, because I want you to be able to demonstrate emotional intelligence, understanding other people's emotions and understanding your own. Build empathy and respect. Dignify people. Understand the balance of vulnerability, strength, and humility. Build elder persons, individual as yourself. Build elder families, because it is members of this family that will go and work in an organization, and then would have built an elder organization and then elder society. The organizations that will lead the next generation are those who would demonstrate honest empathy and humility. Those that will grow people and understand the boundaries of a healthy masculinity and create that excellent balance. So, for organizational leaders, HR managers, if you need more discussion on this concept of toxic masculinity as it has been affecting your organization, if you need an assessment or as it could affect, you could reach out to us at Valdymas Intelligence, because we don't just train leaders, we transform them. Through our global, our lean agile frameworks, we create mentorship structures, we build value-driven learning system. We help individuals and organizations build character, competence, and purpose-driven performance. We believe in leadership that is accountable, that is agile, and anchored in the truth. We're here to work with you through clarity, through any challenges you're facing, and onto transformation. Why not visit valdymasintelligence.org to begin the journey with us? Thank you so much. Bye.